When I came back in the office, I was shocked to learn that this weekend, the biggest story, frenzied social media rumors speculating whether Donald Trump has died. For the record, Donald Trump is very much alive, okay? And no, we like our president.
And I think that they are going to be very surprised. I'm talking about the Trump people and the MAGA nation by what's going to happen on Tuesday. Not only do I feel, to answer your question 10 minutes later, that I feel the same way that I felt a few weeks ago that Trump is toast. Absolutely.
Donald Trump, who likes to appear untouchable, is challenged by Stephen Colbert's sharp humor and Michael Moore's constant scrutiny. While he presents himself as larger than life, they reveal that his image rests on weak myths and exaggerations. Their roast doesn't just mock him, it breaks down his every act until the illusion falls apart under the weight of ridicule.
Trump made the announcement during an Oval Office event yesterday where he added insult to invasion.
Chicago is a hellhole right now.
How dare you, sir? Chicago is not a hellhole right now. Chicago is not a hellhole until February. Then it is a sub-zero windswept vista of frozen Lake Michigan.
Colbert jumps in first, cutting straight into Trump's obsession with appearances. He strips away the grand image and shows how nonstop bragging turns supposed victories into cheap parodies. Every show of strength comes off like a skit. Every attempt at seriousness feels like a setup for a joke. The man who feeds on spectacle ends up becoming the spectacle himself. As Colbert points out, how even the tiniest mistake becomes headline comedy when the act was never built on real substance.
Donald Trump is very much alive, and this whole crazy rumor started simply because Trump had 0 events on his schedule Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, and one of the only signs that he might still be around was music in the Rose Garden, which the White House confirmed was the president's music. Which I gotta say is not the strongest proof of love.
If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. Michael Moore steps in with his documentary-style precision, breaking down the myth of Trump's business empire. He shows it's not a tale of genius, but one built on family wealth, safety nets, and repeated bailouts. The towers with his name aren't monuments of brilliance, but symbols of a brand constantly repackaged to hide the lack of real achievement. Moore highlights how the so-called victories were more about selling an image than delivering substance. He even argues that Trump has blown up the system itself, turning the Republican Party into the Trump Party while leaving Democrats weak and ineffective. Colbert, meanwhile, turns Trump's chaotic circle of staff into a running gag, mocking the endless firings as if they were sitcom exits before the credits. Moore pushes further, showing the instability as deliberate a way to avoid accountability. What was once spun as bold leadership is exposed as nonstop chaos with no real direction.
Well, I think that the system has already been blown up for me. He has completely destroyed the Republican Party. In my film, John Boehner, the former Speaker of the House, Republican, said there is no Republican Party anymore. It's called the Trump Party. And there is really no Democratic Party anymore because the Democrats are completely impotent and incapable of getting somebody.
If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. Michael Moore steps in with his documentary-style precision, breaking down the myth of Trump's business empire. He shows it's not a tale of genius, but one built on family wealth, safety nets, and repeated bailouts. The towers with his name aren't monuments of brilliance, but symbols of a brand constantly repackaged to hide the lack of real achievement. Moore highlights how the so-called victories were more about selling an image than delivering substance. He even argues that Trump has blown up the system itself, turning the Republican Party into the Trump Party while leaving Democrats weak and ineffective. Colbert, meanwhile, turns Trump's chaotic circle of staff into a running gag, mocking the endless firings as if they were sitcom exits before the credits. Moore pushes further, showing the instability as deliberate a way to avoid accountability. What was once spun as bold leadership is exposed as nonstop chaos with no real direction.
Yesterday, Trump also posted, "Chicago is the worst and most dangerous city in the world by far." Worst and most dangerous? 2 words. You.
Moore pushes the humor even further by pointing to Trump's endless rallies. What are promoted as moments of unity turn into stand-up shows built around self-praise. The chanting crowds, the overblown promises, the repeated complaints. Colbert recasts them as comedy festivals pretending to be politics. The focus isn't on solving problems, but on keeping the spotlight shining and the applause going.
The way that what you just played here, I hadn't heard Trump utter those words. I'd heard somebody say that he said them, but to hear him say that about they can shoot through the media, the assassins, go ahead and fire, and all those other things you just played, it's like they really believe that the average normal American wants to hear.
Colbert, on the other hand, digs into the consequences of Trump's performance, showing how his speeches bury truth under constant repetition and exaggeration. Moore adds that this turns fact-checking into a hopeless effort, as what seems like blunders are really tactics to flood the conversation with so much noise that the truth becomes blurred.
Because yesterday, Donald Trump made a hard right onto the fascism freeway, announcing that he will deploy National Guard troops to Chicago. Our brave... Yes, boo. Our brave soldiers are not supposed to be wandering around Americans.
Both destroyers converge on President Trump's combative relationship with the media.
Colbert and Moore both take aim at Trump's battles with the media. Colbert mocks the contradiction of a man who craves attention yet constantly rages at coverage, portraying him as someone who survives only on a mix of praise and conflict. Moore takes it further, arguing that attacking reporters isn't just a habit, but a tactic to weaken accountability. Together, they show how Trump treats scrutiny as a personal insult instead of a cornerstone of democracy. Colbert then zeroes in on Trump's claims of moral authority, contrasting his lofty speeches with the scandals that followed him like shadows. The gap between words and reality becomes comedy gold, exposing how contradictions are brushed aside as long as the act goes on. Moore deepens the point, framing it as a deliberate gamble. Repeat the language of virtue enough times, and hope the echoes drown out the evidence.
Country, and to talk about immigrants in this vicious, vile way, where and you think of all the things that we have and we've given the world, and the anger and hatred toward Muslims and Arabs. Steve Jobs. This never gets discussed. Maybe I'm just a trivia nerd, but he's born of Muslim parents. His parents were Arab, and they put him up for adoption. They had to put him up for adoption, and was adopted by the Jobs family.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be talking to you maybe on this device right now in this way without this offspring of a Muslim.
Trump's constant hunger for praise becomes another shared target. Colbert pokes fun at his late-night rants on social media, where complaints pour out like entries in a public diary. Moore reframes them as a clear pattern Trump cannot stand. Silence, hates being irrelevant, and feels compelled to stay in the spotlight. What looks like impulse is revealed as obsession, with visibility mattering more than policy or principle. Together, Colbert and Moore paint him not as the strong man he imagines, but as a performer trapped by his own act. Colbert wraps each flaw in biting humor, while Moore pulls back the curtain to expose the emptiness beneath. Their combined critique is both comedy and dissection, one mocking the absurdity, the other exposing the manipulation. In the end, Trump's image of invincibility shatters, leaving only the spectacle of a man who cannot escape his performance.
Trump is concerned with something he finds far more dangerous than disease.
Big ugly windmills, they ruin your neighborhood.
The windmills that don't work when you need them. The windmills are driving the whales crazy, obviously. Do you want to see a bird cemetery? Just go under a windmill.
You want to see a bird cemetery? You want to see a bird widow in her veil crying over the casket? An open casket. I don't know why they made that choice. It looks like a mess.
Colbert shifts the spotlight to Trump's obsession with legacy, mocking his craving for statues and textbook mentions as a desperate grab for permanence in a world that sees him only as spectacle. What he imagines as monuments of greatness are more likely to stand as warnings of arrogance. Moore adds that history remembers patterns, and Trump's pattern is relentless self-promotion disguised as leadership. Colbert keeps the momentum with biting humor, pointing out how Trump boasts of achievements as if they were unmatched, often declaring victories before battles even begin. He compares it to a magician exposing tricks so obvious that only the performer believes them. Moore then returns to the myth of Trump's financial genius, showing how it rested on loopholes, bailouts, and endless rebranding of failure as resilience. Under his lens, the towers, golf courses, and casinos transform into symbols of debt and overreach. Instead of a master of prosperity, Trump emerges as someone who survives not through brilliance, but by recycling the same act over and over.
Oh, there's a fun little story from the Smile File. Donald Trump became the first former president to go on criminal trial. We'll get there. We got an idea. The official name of the trial is the people of the state of New York versus Donald Trump. The people of the state of New York? That's us. Okay, hold on. I know you're excited, but don't cheer too loud. We need you to get picked for jury duty.
Moore keeps the comedy rolling by poking fun at Trump's obsession with conflict, picturing him waking up each day looking for a new fight, whether with politicians, athletes, or celebrities. Each spat is framed as a grand battle, but Colbert spins it into a carnival act, with Trump as the loud barker who thrives on arguments. Instead of appearing like a statesman, he comes off as a contestant in an endless shouting match. Moore goes further, showing how Trump turns every crisis, whether natural disasters, economic troubles, or global tensions, into a stage for self-promotion rather than real solutions. What the public gets isn't leadership or reassurance, but chest-thumping as if branding could replace action. Colbert then jumps in to spotlight Trump's constant hunger for affirmation, mocking how he surrounds himself with flattery, applause, and loyalty demands. Rather than power, it reveals fragility, with the White House recast as a comedy club where Trump insists on being the headliner every night. The laughter may be forced, but the desperation behind it is unmistakable.
Oh, even more so. I just keep wondering the gift that the Trump campaign keeps giving us. I don't think they realize, I don't think they really are in touch with where the majority of Americans are at. The majority of Americans do not.
Colbert brings the focus back to governing, showing how Trump blurred the line between leadership and self-promotion. Policies were packaged like ad campaigns, slogans replaced substance, and photo ops stood in for progress. Moore frames the presidency as less an office of leadership and more a stage for one man's performance, with the nation as the audience and the script written for his ego. Colbert sharpens the irony. The man who attacked elites relied on them constantly, and the outsider who vowed to topple the establishment leaned on its very structure to survive. His supposed rebellion looked less like revolution and more like redecorating loud wallpaper over the same old walls. Moore points out how the obsession with appearing powerful only created instability, amplifying noise instead of building strength. Colbert drives the theme home, portraying every policy announcement as a one-night-only event, more interested in headlines than results. Press conferences looked like stand-up specials, full of cameras but empty of follow-through. The performance never ended because the spotlight was the only goal. Moore zooms out, reframing Trump not as a leader who shaped history, but as a character who hijacked a trading governance for theater. For him, this isn't legacy, but a warning. The tale of a man who never stopped performing long enough to lead. Colbert closes with cutting laughter, casting Trump's presidency not as a reign of strength, but as the longest-running sketch comedy, where the lead actor never realized the joke was on him. What was meant to be power became parody, and what was supposed to be dominance became the punchline.
Trump has hated windmills Trump has hated windmills ever since 2011 when he unsuccessfully tried to stop an offshore wind farm from being built near one of his Scottish golf courses. Now he's taking his revenge. This way, the White House ordered its agencies to escalate the fight against offshore wind. Yes, the fight against wind has begun. Mimes of America, assemble!
Together,
Colbert and more don't end their roast. With just jokes, they tear down the myth of Trump piece by piece. Colbert uses sharp humor like a scalpel, while Moore strikes with heavy analysis. And together they reveal not a towering leader, but a man trapped in his own performance, forever chasing applause that fades as soon as the lights dim. Colbert zeroes in on Trump's habit of turning personal grudges into national debates, showing how every insult aimed at rivals reflects his inability to separate private resentment from public duty. The presidency becomes less a seat of authority and more a stage for endless quarrels. Moore builds on this, exposing how flashy policy announcements often fizzled before reaching real action. He frames this as a deliberate cycle out declarations create the illusion of progress, while the lack of results gets buried under the next headline. Substance disappears beneath spectacle. Colbert then mocks Trump's obsession with superlatives, ridiculing how everything is billed as the greatest or biggest until the claims collapse under their own weight, turning credibility into comedy. Moore balances the humor by highlighting the damage. Constant self-promotion eroded trust in institutions, strained alliances, and warped decision-making, where protecting image mattered more than solving problems. In his view, the showman's hunger for the spotlight weakened the very foundation of governance.